Welcome back to Marketing Trends. This is your host, Jeremy Bergeron. Today I spoke with the Chief Marketing Officer of Colliers, Chrissy Nolen. If you don't know about Colliers, this is a huge commercial real estate brokerage and investment management company to the tune of $10-12 billion plus a year. Massive organization, global reach. And Chrissy came into the studio here in Austin to talk about the success she's had going from managing the front desk at a small boutique to being the global chief marketing officer for Colliers, an incredible human. The key to successful marketing really lies in the ability to seamlessly communicate with consumers, to know what they want, when they want it, and then communicate with them so they can actually get it. In a world of incredibly competitive industries, especially in Chrissy's industry, quick and efficient marketing can be the difference between a business surviving or not. Chrissy Nolen is the CMO of Colliers, and she's made a name for herself as a person who can see the places where critical communication can be improved, and Colliers has benefited greatly from her vision. To hear all about Chrissy and how she went from front desk manager at a boutique real estate firm with a bold idea to switch to digital innovation to Chief Marketing Officer for one of the largest real estate companies in the world. Be sure to tune into this week's episode of Marketing Trends. Before we dive into this conversation, I wanted to say thank you to our partners at Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. Now let's get into it. What was that like? And I'm not sure it's related to marketing, but I just want to know what that experience was like because I know it was in your bio.
Yes. So she was a 2-time cancer survivor, and
Wow.
we knew at a young age that she wasn't going to be able to have children. So I always, when I didn't know what it really entailed, I'd be a surrogate for you. And she was like, no, I'm going to adopt. But then she got married, and her husband was really interested in having his own kids. And it made the most amount of sense because it was at that point in time, she had already, there was no way for her to even recover any eggs or anything. So this was great because it was a mix of her own genes, and
Right.
it was a really not as expensive or evasive process. It was like going to the doctor and doing like an official turkey baster type thing. And
Right.
it took 3 tries. So we almost gave up after the 3rd try, but we got pregnant. The funniest story on that probably throughout the whole process is we were so excited. It finally happened. And my one of my daughters had to go to the doctor's office, and my husband took them. And as soon as the doctor walked in, the younger one blurted, "My mommy's pregnant with Uncle Corey's baby." And my husband was like,
man.
"Let me explain." I wasn't in the room.
What had happened
Yes.
was...
And so it was, we
wow.
quickly don't talk about other people's business. They were young. They were about 8.
Okay.
And so it was great to be completely transparent and honest with them about the the process.
Wow.
They technically have a half sister, half cousin.
Ah,
So it's an ongoing, I think, processing, but it's a gift that keeps on giving. The joy that she brings to them, making them parents, and then the joy she brings to our family during the holidays, and just watching her grow up. She's 3 now.
I'm about to say, okay, she's 3. Okay.
So
Wow.
her personality is coming out, and it's just a great joy.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you get to see her quite often? Are they live in the area, or?
Yes, they live.
Okay.
They live nearby. We go to the same church.
Okay.
And at the very beginning, I decided not to see her for about 6 weeks, just
Okay.
to let my hormones wash out and not
Got
to
it.
try to take any ownership of the way things were, how things were being done. And
Yeah.
so that separation was great because it was like getting to meet my niece. But it's a lot, 6 weeks is a long time. So,
Yeah.
and I was able to kind of fully recover and heal. And
Wow, what a journey. Have you ever written about this or spoke about this at all?
No, I did write one thing
Okay.
because of the surrogacy process. I didn't breastfeed, and so that actually caused the post-birth to revert. And even though I had given birth twice before, my body naturally healed itself, but because of without breastfeeding, there was like, without getting too technical, I should have been like massaging my stomach, and I wasn't. And so I came to a very close near death experience
Whoa.
where I was at home a couple of weeks later and I started bleeding. And had my husband not been home, and he was a police officer, and he kind of knew like when to call the ambulance. I don't know if I would have made it another 15, 20 minutes. And so we're just so lucky to live near great healthcare. And so I did write about that experience just because I felt that it could inform that, like, even though I had gone through it, that was my third time going through it, I really didn't know what my body should have been doing. And so that's something that I could have better monitored, especially as someone that was a surrogate. I think that I should have known.
Wow. Well, so having been a mom, having carried two other kids, it's two daughters, right?
Two daughters.
Okay, two girls. Was the third just pregnancy? Was it easier because it was the number three? It's like you've been here before. Your body, like you said, you knew you had some stuff post that happened. But what about just that experience of being number three? Was it like, I got this?
I was almost 10 years older. So,
Okay.
So my body wasn't as, I definitely took more naps. I was lucky enough to have a couch in the office, and I would lay down just for about 15 minutes. I just could not stay awake, but about 15 minutes is all I needed, and then I'd bounce back.
Wow.
But I definitely didn't have that kind of fatigue the first time around.
Man, that's amazing. That's cool. It's just it's a really what a cool story, and I'm sure this is an interesting community of people who who have done that as well in different forms and variations. And I think it makes for a really pretty magical beginning of a story of like, okay, now where are you going? Where is she going? And your sister, and how does this all play out? So that's really cool. So you grew up in Houston. So you're H-Town through and through.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in Houston, went to U of H, studied marketing at U of H?
Yes.
Okay. So was there, I know I saw in your profile that you started, like there was this kind of boutique commercial real estate firm. You were like a marketing specialist there. So when did the love affair with marketing start? Was that in college, or was that like something, when did you start to dance with marketing of like, this is something I want to kind of get into?
So my mom was the executive director of the local women's center.
Okay.
And so I was her best volunteer, and I started learning a lot about marketing through volunteer projects, from stuffing envelopes for invitations, for watching her network and try to get the sales of donations and sponsors to these events, and what it would take to put her best foot forward for and the benefits that the organization got because of those marketing components and what was needed. And so that was kind of my first eye into it. And then I've been a tech nerd for a really long time. I took 3 years of computer science in high school. Was one of the only girls in that senior, computer science 3. And
what language were you studying that in? Were we going back to Java or what?
It was like CS3.
Okay. All right.
Old school.
Yeah.
And so being able to combine those two things and make websites and kind of speak that HTML language to make things come to life, it was not something that a lot of people enjoy doing or like to do. And so when I found this marketing gig, the biggest thing that they needed was a website, even though it was 2007. And so I was like, yes, I can build you a website. But I did honestly go to Google and like, how do you build a website?
That's great. I love it.
And from there, I was fortunate to land in this commercial real estate industry. That it's not a well-known or well-versed industry to a lot of people. You don't grow up saying, I want to be in this industry. It's very much a niche. And I uncovered this world that doesn't have a lot of, it didn't have a lot of marketing technology at the beginning. It is very much... there's a lot of new brands and companies that are entering our space, and it's kind of hard to choose, between all of them. It's almost like which one's going to talk to our systems the best and which one's going to allow us to be more proficient versus take a ton of time to implement as it goes. But before, there just wasn't a lot of marketing technology at the very beginning.
Okay. So this was you're talking about at the small boutique.
Yes, which merged with Colliers.
Okay, so that's an interesting intersection. So, as a marketing specialist, you started off at this boutique, commercial firm where you built their website. You really got into, like you said, creating things that come to life and connecting with people online. There wasn't a lot of technology.
No, they were still mailing their flyers
Wow.
at that point in time.
Okay.
And so I digitized them and we started emailing the people interested in properties.
Okay. So then Colliers acquired this.
We merged with Colliers to win a big new development.
Okay.
And the local boutique firm was like the boots on the ground, and Colliers was the tools and resources of the global firm. And we were the perfect pair to be able to market this new development.
So were they a pretty big organization at that point when they merged?
Were. Colliers has a unique marketing story. We're newer on the publicly traded realm, but when I first started, we had just recently, or when I first joined, we had recently done a marketing rebrand where everybody was almost like law firms, where it was like Colliers McCall or Colliers Appelt Womack, and so they had made the decision in 2010 to everybody go by Colliers International. And that was a big change. We had a new logo, we had new branding standards. And so I helped the company convert over into those new standards. And then 10 years later, almost, we went through another rebrand where we dropped the gradient in our logo. We dropped the word international. It was really hard to see anyways once we got it so small. And so now it's just Colliers. We figured that none of our other bigger competitors have the word international in them, and and they're international, so that was no longer needed. And so we recently went through that rebrand where we just gave, I don't know if it's like about every 10 years where a company feels like it needs a new, just a little bit of a new shift, but we were definitely ready for some new fresh marketing materials too.
Okay. Was that something that you kind of spearheaded, the latest rebrand? Like, was that something you're like, we need to do this? How did that conversation even start?
No, it was something that we were hinted on, and we had conversations that it was needed, especially since we had just become publicly traded. It was how do we evolve to the next level? And so that's when those conversations were taking place. And then we were about to launch a couple weeks after COVID hit. And so we took a pause and we decided that wasn't the right time. And so we waited about a year. And what was great about that is that we had already put forth everything about the new brand. And so we had a year to develop all of these new templates and materials and tools to make the brand easier to use and easier to implement. And so then that way, every marketer across the world would be able to access these templates. And so, getting a digital asset management system that everybody could access, integrating it with the system instead of it being kind of rushed and maybe even like kind of put together across the world. I feel like that year gave us a really good stepping stone of getting everybody on that same page and then being able to develop a lot of training around the new brand. And I haven't really seen a ton of people misuse the new brand like our old brand. So that's exciting.
What prompted the latest rebrand? Like, what was the reason for it, the latest one?
It was to, I think, get our logo into this, into this century. We still had a gradient. We were using that word international, so we dropped that. It's easier to see, more visible. It has a whole. The theme behind it was own the blue. So we have a new blue, and we pushing that forward, across all of our property material and assets. After 10 years of having the same templates before, we were kind of all over the place. And so this has been great to kind of bring us back together, because we have a lot of different marketing professionals touching all of our assets across the world.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too. It seems like with the presence that that Colliers has, and we were talking about 65 plus countries. I mean, 4 billion plus a year in revenue, huge numbers of team across the world. In terms of marketing, is it decentralized where there's like marketing folks in these places, or do you feel like everything is coming from the hub in Houston where you are and the main team is? Like, what does that look like?
Actually, our corporate's in Canada,
Okay.
which has been interesting. When we went
Quebec?
public,
Wait, is it Quebec?
Yes,
Okay.
so it wasn't always there.
Okay.
But having a corporate team in Canada is interesting just because we're so used to everything being the United States. And even when our new signatures came out, like the Colliers.com was linked to Colliers Canada. And we're like, what is happening? So there's been a little bit of some faux pas there and learning lessons and
Sure.
things that we didn't realize that we would have to double check. So it's very decentralized. We
Okay.
have a core team that makes a lot of those standard branding, marketing core decisions, and then it gets pushed out.
Okay. So it's starting with the core team, and then how do you have the team? Like, what's the team look like? Is there, demand gen folks? Like, is it segmented by folks that are part of different parts of the funnel, or is it by industry segment? How's the team actually like structured?
So we have both.
Okay.
We have both. We have very localized experts, and then we also have people on the national and global team that are pushing best practices down. And then we also are split it up into regions, so then that way we can get best practices and push them up as well. So we have both happening at the same time.
Wow. Okay.
And we have a head of technology, head of marketing, and so we have different people in those positions to focus on those different areas.
Okay. So what's kind of the focus this year? We're in 2022. What is like the landscape looking like now in your space? What are you really focused on right now in the next year?
So one of the biggest things that we found from a metric that we had pulled, we were able to put all these great dashboards together during some of the downtime initially when COVID happened, when we were all kind of sat home and we were figuring, we even actually had, extra bandwidth and the source of our receptionist, right? She didn't have a place to do anything, but very bright. And so we're able to tap into like, here, let's get you onto our team and get you productive. And so we're really fortunate to not lay off anybody during COVID. And we actually went through a huge growth phase. So we were having to onboard people remotely, which was new and challenging in and of itself. But these metrics that we're able to pull, we realized that if we created these dashboards for our clients, that we weren't losing any property, or we weren't losing, I think up to like 86% of the clients that we may have lost in 2020 didn't have dashboards. So that has been a big initiative this year, is that instead of without dashboards, we're giving them maybe weekly or monthly updates, and dashboards allow us to give it to them 24/7. It keeps us accountable, having to keep it updated and so forth. And our clients are really loving that. And so a huge initiative is, how do we implement this, not just for all of our listings locally, but regionally and nationally, because we're able to sync the data.
So it sounds like the Great Resignation didn't really impact Colliers. You said, there's a lot of industries that got hit really hard, where it sounds like you guys were actually growing. You're onboarding people and hiring.
We did lose people that wanted to either be closer to their families, now that they weren't able to go out. And so we did have, people move back home. We kept a few of those, and because, we were all remote anyways. And so we still have a few people that live away from the, original city that they were hired in. And then we did lose people to, just different states so they could be back home. So, but we had to hire for those positions, and then we had to learn how to onboard remotely.
So many companies had to pivot so rapidly, and it's crazy sometimes to hear how fast they had to move to, they were planning maybe this huge event, they had to pivot and make it virtual, or onboard a ton of new employees that were already slated to come in the office, or, change, entire ways that teams are collaborating because they're no longer coming in. And see, that's interesting to hear some of the things that were done there. Okay, so you said this dashboard is a big deal. Now, this dashboard is telling your customers what?
They're telling them where their property is being marketed. So linked to all of their properties. It is telling them when we send emails in regards to their property, their stats, the open rate, how many people it was sent to, the click rate, any active prospects, market data. So any competitive sets that's around there. If someone's looking for that type of property, any recent requirements that have come across, and then some market data, so some stats about the vacancy and very similar product. So all of that in one place that they can see, and it's updated 24/7.
Wow. So is that something that Colliers built in-house?
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes.
Versus build versus buy. Like you decided, hey, we're going to build it, customize it for our customers.
Right. So we have a lot of different segments, and some information we do outsource, and some information we bring in, and then we decide to database those and manage those ourselves. So just depending on what it is, but finding a solution that allows us to tap into that data easily and using it for whatever purpose we need. So the same database used thousands of different ways has been a key into the success of our recent initiatives, and something that we're investing in to expand upon.
Wow. So you guys had a ton of data, obviously with all of the properties and, the people that you're serving across these industries. Was it overwhelming to kind of take that data and then now we're going to house this in a dashboard or pull from this data to display that? Was that just a beast of a project in and of itself?
I think it was slow. Like the dashboards that we see today are a culmination of the last 3 to 4 years of building it, and it definitely wasn't overnight. And so we had this data. We were just accessing it a really long and hard way before. Like every time we needed this data, we had to pull it from the original source, reformat it, and put it through. Where now it's all in one place, and we're not having to do like those individual queries.
Wow. Did you make investments in data science at all, or any sorts of ways to look at this intelligence and this data that you have to tell you new things, or maybe, to tell a different story? Or
no, the platform that we're using is no code. Okay. And so we did do an investment of training everyone on our support staff the software, and having them be comfortable and even get certified. And so we have a couple of different certifications. We have Colliers University, which is the only thing of its kind in our industry, where people marketers can get certified in property marketing certificate and property research. Oh, wow. And so that is easy to put together once. It's very challenging to keep updated. You have to have someone that really knows, the entire curriculum, and making sure that we're putting the latest InDesign training, or so it's linked, it's constantly linked to the latest and greatest. So it gets stale very easily. So keeping that up to date. And then for something like the software, we provide like a $500 gift certificate if you get certified. So just, incentive for them to become experts in these tools and resources that we're using.
What metrics are you looking at as the marketing leader of Colliers? Like, what are some of the things that you are maybe paying attention to now? Maybe it's monthly, maybe it's daily. What are some of the things that you get excited about in terms of metrics?
In terms of metrics?
Yeah.
Well, we take a look every month, and we share it with our producers. One of the biggest metrics that we pulled is how much visibility bringing in some of our what used to be in-person only events has enabled us to get when we put them online and open to the public. And so before, we didn't even think about recording and making. So now one of our best practices is to have this in-person event, but then also to record it and to get it out and make it a publicly open invitation. And the amount of views that we're able to get, and we would never have known that had we just not been paying attention or focused on the metrics from month or quarter to quarter.
When it comes to like the different, because these segments that you're serving, your office, retail, industrial, healthcare properties, multifamily, when it comes to just communication to these different segments of customers, like, do you find that you have to kind of, get into the silo? Okay, now we're dealing with people that are focused in office or retail. And so maybe the language is different because their industries was impacted differently in the last couple of years. So what they're struggling with is different than healthcare, or you said retail made a big comeback. Like, how do you view the customer communication in all of these segments? Because to me, they're similarities, but they're also impacted differently, and they're different stakeholders, and they might care about one thing and they don't really care about that thing. And so how do you connect with each of these industries in a way that's authentic, where you're listening and where it's meaningful, with all the changes happening in all these industries?
So we have leaders that head up each of the different practices, and we also specialize in getting reports out for each of those sectors. So market report data that's specific to that sector. And our global blog, Knowledge Leader, allows for anybody to be an author across Colliers, which is great. So even if you,
that's cool.
So you don't have to have a weekly, and it all is contributed. And then we have all those tags. So if someone is looking for healthcare specific data, whether they're looking for it in your local market, or if they're looking on a national trend, or if they want some commentary, we have all of that content that is so we're utilizing the people that we have in each of our offices to surface up the trends for those, individual topics. So then that way, at least when people are looking, they can find some great commentary.
Yeah. How often are these trends changing and shifting in these spaces in your industry?
We tend to write quarterly reports.
Okay.
We have standard quarterly reports, and then whenever there is a big trend or change, that's when you start seeing these one-off commentaries that get written.
Okay. So like, for example, COVID, or, when this happened, I'm sure there was probably a shift in trends when a lot of industries that you serve, in some ways maybe more positive, some negative, but
we measure by quarter. Did it go down this quarter, or did it go up? How did it measure to this quarter the previous year? And then how did it measure to the last quarter?
What industries kind of surprised you in kind of the comeback? I know you said retail was one that had to obviously shift and evolve, but what are some interesting maybe use cases you saw, or stories around the way some industries responded to this last couple of years?
So I think COVID shut down a lot of retailers that were probably going to be shutting down in the next few years. It just kind of sped up that process. But then you saw a lot of new retail concepts and brands that started coming. They kind of filled the need that combined service and experience and speed. The ones that were able to shift quickly, you saw doing really well. In Texas, we were able to have alcohol sales for the first time, and so the retailers that were able to add those things to their menu quickly for checkout, that did the carry out super easy, that you took advantage of all these apps. You saw them being, at least making it through and successful. It's really hard for them to find help. So that's been a challenge for a lot of the retailers, and has, I think, stunted growth in some areas, especially if people go and they can't get good service.
Right.
It might prevent them from going again. And so that's an ongoing, but they have retail's on fire right now. And I'm working with several national brands that are looking to expand their footprints and, all over the nation.
Okay. Wow.
And so industrial, we don't have enough warehouse space. It's amazing. I think we delivered in Houston over 28 million square feet or 24 million, and absorbed 28 million.
Wow. And
so we'll continue to see more industrial warehouses being built for those shipping needs. And then office took a big hit. And I still don't know if we know where that's going to go. I think we're waiting to see how many companies bring everybody back after Omicron, or what that, perfect mix is. And then there's been a huge investment into multifamily. So multifamily is turning, it's a safe place to invest.
Why do you think there's been a big investment in multifamily?
I don't know. That's not my.
I'm curious. Yeah, I have other investor friends that they've been talking about the same thing. They're like getting in all these passive multifamily deals, and they said it's really been great.
I think the move down here has helped, at least here, here in Texas, and it's just a safe bet, because you have that reoccurring income every month, and sometimes it doesn't take much to renovate, and then you get a whole new set of residents that will come, and so it's fun projects, and it doesn't require, you could be a starter investor, or you could have be large, so it also accommodates people of all investment sizes.
I think it's cool that you get to sit at this this intersection of all these industries, where I think some people based on what they're seeing and hearing, would kind of look out in the world and be like, oh, I mean, it's all everything's awful and nothing's, everything's changing and businesses are failing and people are dying and all these things. And it's like, but then you kind of get a really interesting glimpse into some like how these industries are actually responding at a big global kind of macro level of like, what are folks doing regionally, but also around the world in these industries. And it's like, to me, it's much more encouraging to kind of, just to hear and see, like, you're seeing investments in these things go up. You're seeing the business you said did incredible last year. And so that's got to be encouraging. And also, I think some people would forget that, when you take a deeper look at some of these industries and how they're responding and innovating, it's going to be encouraging.
Yes, and it's very cyclical. I mean, I've seen it over the time that, some producers could have their best year and the next have their worst. I mean, so it's very cyclical in all the sectors are.
Now, thinking in that same vein of like being cyclical, I'm curious about, there's a lot of competition in your space. I mean, you could argue there's some top, tier brands, CBRE, Newmark, Cushman and Wakefield, some of these brands. How competitive are you guys across the industry? It's like, to me, it's like if you're working with a customer or a client, they're pretty entrenched with you and they're pretty like, I can't see them switching to making switches super easy, like maybe with some services and products where customers are. Is that the case in this industry, or do you feel like you really have to fight and protect your customers against all the other, really big competitors that you have?
Well, most of our clients do get called on by all of the competitors. And so maintaining that great relationship is crucial and key. Colliers, as a growing and larger brand, I believe we have a seat at the table when it comes to some of the larger transactions because we've been a proven success and the tools and the resources that we're able to help our clients with. But when it comes down to the smaller clients, enabling those local producers to be able to maintain and manage those relationships has been key and one of the bigger challenges because, it is easy to switch. I mean, it is, it could be where you missed a renewal or you didn't give that person a call. And so, customers or clients are going to go with the easiest, like this person's on it, they're interested, they're calling me. So it's still very much something that you have to stay on top of, or else, it is easy to lose people just because you're not on top of the follow-up.
What does demand gen look like in your space?
That is because it's such a relationship. So what I've seen is even if we have everything's perfect and we might be the best person for the job, I've seen where we've lost because the broker that was chosen to either work on it, they didn't mesh well with the client. Even genders play a big part. We don't see a lot of female producers. And I think it's actually harder for female producers because most of the decision makers, the way that it is, they are older gentlemen. And so you see, you have to, it's a great working relationship and it takes a lot of, hours and negotiating and going back and forth. And so these deals have to be with somebody that you enjoy doing business with. And so we see, we do a lot of personality training. So the DISC and knowing, when the client is upset or what they're looking for, maybe what they need, as far as a lot of the brokers are high eyes. They're salespeople, and sometimes so teaching them to recognize, if and when they'll need a little bit of an S or a C to accommodate, or to bring them into their deals. So it's a lot of training that way.
Wow, that's interesting. I love the DISC. I think that's brilliant, and that's super smart. What's been your experience, kind of thinking about going from, marketing strategist, marketing consultant, kind of working your way up now to being CMO, because you've gone from this individual contributor that's interested in marketing to, building out things that didn't exist before, to now bringing technology into an industry that needed a lot of innovation, to leading marketing now as a leader. What's the journey been like for you, just going from learning marketing and studying it and practicing it to now being at the helm of marketing? And there's a big transition there.
I think the biggest thing is learning how to empower people and to let go of, it doesn't always have to be your way, but empowering people to do those jobs and those skill sets, figuring out what they're passionate about, and being, letting them, spread their wings. And so I've learned a lot. One of my biggest learning lessons was probably at the very beginning when I was a baby manager. I was ready to let somebody go just because it seemed like they weren't working. And fortunately, I had a great mentor that led me to some great management tips and books to read. And I was able to turn around just simply by asking, what is it that you need from me to be successful? And what can I do to help you? And just she at the time said just a weekly meeting. And so that it was amazing to see how that little question was able to turn things around. And so now the biggest thing is helping other people manage others well, and help them train others. So when someone comes to me and saying, here's the issue, well, what do you think the answer is? Mm-hmm. And how can we help that person, or how can we help make the solution happen? And so that's been the biggest probably learning lesson is everything, or every complaint almost is like an opportunity of how we can grow and get better.
So it's like going from contributing, managing people, managing managers, developing leaders to support, because now your visibility is probably somewhat limited because you're leading the team. You can't get into the weeds maybe like you used to.
Right.
That's interesting. So in terms of the age-old question of how to align marketing and sales, and especially in the world where you're at, where to me deal sizes are big deals, big relationships are on the line, higher stakes, you could say in some ways, what are some of the things that you've seen in your time, and now of course being a CMO, like to connect these two, that oftentimes it's like one doesn't know what the other one's doing, marketing doesn't know what they're doing, sales doesn't know what they're doing. How are you aligning these two things now in 2022?
So the biggest thing that the most successful thing that I think we've done to align is the age-old start, stop, keep, where we do an exercise with everyone. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we keep doing? Because we get some great nuggets and some really low-hanging fruit that we can implement, and we get to hear from everybody. And so being able to take those, and then those have turned into, hey, let's brainstorm about this initiative. Let's flesh this out. Is this something that we want to do? Or is there, some like 10 things that we can change very easily that would be a game changer? Maybe not take the work to do everything on a certain initiative, but what are some things that we can go ahead and knock out? And so that, I think, has kept our teams really kind of aligned with the sales team, because we know what they want. And then we hear their pain points, and so we're able to make it easier for them. To me, making it very, very easy for our sales team to access the data has been key. It's great if marketing is able to come up with these great tools and resources, but if it's even just a little bit complicated, to be able to access. So the thing that I hear over and over again is, but I don't know how to access that, even if they've been there for 5 years. So
it's just the card.
I don't know. Spoon feeding it almost.
Wow. So it also, you said earlier how, in this industry, by and large, it's primarily a lot of older men in this industry. Here you are, leading marketing at a very prestigious, business in your world, where you have to go toe to toe with these people all the time, and diversity and equity and inclusion is big now. And a lot of big brands that we speak to are focused on this internally, and so I guess two parts to this is just, how are you able to, to in some ways you're kind of, from my perspective, it's like there's a lot of things changing in your world and industry in terms of like you're now leading marketing and women are coming and leading businesses, and so there's this interesting convergence, but you still have to work with your colleagues and you have to be very amicable and you have to align with them still. What's it been like as a leader, kind of aligning with people that may be a little more old school, right? Where because your whole story has been about bringing the things that, hey, let's bring innovation, and we're no longer licking stamps. Like we're sending emails in new ways. We're building dashboards and all these things. And so what's that kind of been like for you to, to be a woman working all the way up to the top and then still having to align with these stakeholders?
I've been fortunate to have a great mentor, leader, and boss that has that I've worked with most of my career at Colliers.
Oh, cool.
And what's great with the new technology is being able to show those metrics for those new ideas, and then learning just to be quiet and listen, and then figuring out what the problem is and being able to solve it. I mean, we all have an opportunity to kind of, make a difference. And sometimes we hit roadblocks and it takes us a little bit longer or a little bit longer to persuade, why it would be a great idea or a win. And so you're not going to convince them at the, all the time at the very beginning, but being able to develop and show metrics and being able to here's why. And I think it's a little bit easier now, but I also know what to shy away from as well, just with the years of experience of what might, what's really needed.
Okay.
It's been a lot easier, I think, to come up with new solutions that I wouldn't have been able to do 8 or 9 years ago, just being so much newer in the industry.
Where do you see kind of innovation happening in your industries? Like, where do you see things kind of going? Are you experimenting a lot with marketing, or kind of you seeing a lot of industries change and evolve and pivot, and you kind of have an interesting seat at the table? But what are some of the things that you're looking into, whether it's AI or machine learning or other maybe out of the box things that are?
I think one of the coolest things, and I can't wait for this to be like the new norm, is being able to visualize a new development or a new space. Gaming technology has made it much easier for people to create renderings of new spaces. And so I can't wait for that. It's almost there, I feel like, where anybody would be able to kind of like go in and kind of create their own virtual space or world, and then as, architects and the different developers try to go in and like, here are some ideas, they'll be able to visually see it. Because it's kind of hard. I mean, we just went through an expansion space, and it's kind of hard to visualize that floor plan of what is this going to look like, and being able to walk through it, maybe with even a headset on and actually like navigate and realizing, hey, this wall is actually kind of funny here, so even like just the element of designing better spaces.
Like kind of AR type stuff, like where you would kind of like you actually go into
the space before it's built.
Wow. Is that being done now?
It is, but it's expensive.
I love that. And so that you like to see that more, rolled out. Why? That's awesome. Yeah, that'll be coming. That seems like an obvious. At some point, it'll be here.
There's already companies that are starting to do that, but I mean, you have to have a budget.
Right. So in terms of like decision making in your space, like I sit here and I'm thinking, you have to be very strategic in deciding what you're doing, and certainly if you're impacting, because like what you're doing is impacting industries, and so how do you, like, what kind of goes into the process of like, okay, because to me, I mentioned this, like this big ship that you're having to turn. It's like you've not been able to like stop a campaign and test it and pivot and move with the same kind of velocity maybe that other brands might, or it's like you're dealing with large spaces and big deal sizes. And, when you're committing to a decision, you kind of got to see that decision. It would just seem like it would take some time. And to me, you got to time these things right. And you've been, a decade plus there right now. I mean, so it's like you've obviously, anyone that's been in a marketing role, leader role that long, it's like you've figured out how to make these strategic decisions to see that impact. What's your process there? And like, how do you like just trust that? Because to me, it's like you're throwing kind of some Hail Marys in some ways where it's like where is it going to fall? Once you throw it, once you commit to the strategy on how you're going to serve someone in retail or serve someone in, family or industrial, that's the strategy. You can't necessarily change, or is that off?
Well, there's a lot of small things, but like I'm going through that right now where we made an investment in this technology, and it's taking, we made the decision in November, and it's taking until now, like I'm just now like starting to do some user testing. And so it's taking those 3 or 4 months. And my hope was that we'd be, if we were more proficient at creating these dashboards that we'd actually be able to utilize, like, okay, we're spending these resources here, we'll be able to handle more producers, on scale, because this is going to be taking less time. And so making that promise and then working through it to get there, it's kind of like a hurry up and wait kind of type thing, and it's going to get there, but it's just following the steps that are needed and making sure that we're getting the right feedback and the right steps, so then that way it's going to be a successful launch.
Do you look at things like LTV, like a lifetime value of it's like you could pick a segment like, industrial, right? And you look at your clients and in the industrial world that you're servicing and supporting. Like, do you look at those and say, okay, these are worth so much to us, and then how much does it cost us to acquire someone in this world? Do you look at those numbers and then determine, okay, well, we can invest, this just for, easy math, this client's worth, $5 million a year, right, to us, right? To acquire them, we did this. This was the campaign, this was the strategy, whatever. And so that maybe costs us $100,000. Or do you look at those numbers?
It's so hard to try to do that exercise. I've tried it a few times, but sometimes real estate deals can take 2 years. I had a broker that was working on a real estate deal for 10 years. Wow. And they, it finally closed just because there's so many roadblocks that could pop up, whether, it's city planning or zoning. They could have one person on city council that decides that they don't like the development use. And so there's so many things that can move a project forward and or backward. Okay. So it's kind of, and things change. I mean, we were working on this really big development in Midland. It was supposed to be the tallest city tallest building west of the Mississippi, and spent like 2 years marketing it, and it was going to be retail and office and multifamily all in one place. And so the architect work that even went into like making the building drawings, and the people of Midland turned it down. They didn't want that kind of building in their space, and so it's hard to quantify the value of customers just because you don't know what people are cooking up.
Do you have to kind of, not you, but does your team or the folks in the area, do they have to kind of, as part of their strategy, go into these cities and start to find out what they care about? And I'm like, hey, okay, I met with this council in Midland, and like,
normally we're boots on the ground, so we don't have an office in Midland. None of our large competitors do. So normally we're very much boots on the ground, and we know the environment. That's why it's very decentralized across the board, at least marketing wise. But and even our producers, there's some clients that require a national attention and focus and strategy, and so we have corporate teams that specialize in those. But yes, knowing the local environment is key into getting a lot of these projects done.
Are there other kind of roadblocks where you've either created technology or introduced technology to kind of solve these roadblocks in the past couple of years, like things that, where technology is like, okay, we're getting rid of this thing that stopped us or slowed things down before? Are there other maybe examples where technology has helped you overcome roadblocks?
We've enabled technology to get feedback and to just make it easier to get the information out. And so we've using technology across the board, I think, has helped, but I can't think of a specific roadblock. Okay.
Like if there's like I was thinking like some manual, part of the process that was like, always done by this one, either human to human, and it was always like there's a delay and a snag, and like, oh wait, we can actually build technology to support that, and all of a sudden.
So I'm super nerdy, and processes are a thing. So one of early on, we have this big annual event, and it's invite only. And just even keeping up with the RSVPs and the invite list and the amount of people that were contributing to the invite list. It used to be manual. I want to say it was probably like a 40-hour job just to do this invite list. And so getting it onto technology, we're able here's your list, approve, send changes. It's going to have the RSVPs. It took it from 40 hours to probably 10 hours.
Wow.
And that was an annual thing that, we were able to repeat.
Okay.
And so taking a look at the processes is what I think I nerd out on the most, is like, how do we make that faster?
You feel like now that you've been there, as long as you've been there, you can influence change a little quicker in terms of like, hey, we need a way better solution around this process or procedure?
Because we're just able to implement it.
Right. You can just rock it now.
Mm-hmm. And we have so many people that know the tool well enough too, that they are constantly coming up with ideas of how we can do things. And then it's very easy to just make the change. I know that we're still dealing with like a legacy CRM system that has all of our accounting in it. And so we haven't moved on from there. And it's my biggest pain to try to get the data out and be able to do something with it, but that's not necessarily under marketing. So I haven't necessarily been able to touch that yet. So working around it. How can I extract the data, or how can I import the data very quickly and easily on a regular basis? So we kind of build the tool that we need it to do, at least for us and a lot of people.
Okay. You know who sponsors this show, right?
Yes, Salesforce.
I know, like if you haven't spoken to Salesforce, I'm like, shameless plug, which we actually never
Colliers
do. But
is actually a client of Salesforce.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool.
They're a national CRM platform.
Okay, great. No, yeah, they've been a fantastic partner. But I'm like, if you need CRM love, like Salesforce is a great one. What about just cybersecurity and just security in general? It seems like marketing leaders now have to have this, this line to the CTO or the CIO now, where customers' data and marketing data is, it's a big deal now. And so what's been that kind of experience like for you as a marketing leader?
I think it's been a big pain because we have to turn on MFA for everything. And, every user, every application, requires this, the additional authorization. And so, which is great. Our data is protected. We did go through a slight fallback, and that's why it was turned on, is because one of our systems did get into. And so now that it's been a year and a half later, and we're still having to, even dealing with certain applications that you would want to use and integrate our 365 on, it goes through like these corporate, like you have to get approval. And it's a big chain. And when you have 16,000 employees around the world accessing different apps, I think it can slow. I think because of the security that we have to put in place, it actually sometimes can slow the innovation that we want to bring to the teams.
So how do you combat that?
You're really nice to the IT people.
That's great. That's amazing. And so I love, when I get to speak with marketing leaders like you and just asking kind of like some of their, what are some of the things they've cultivated over the years, of like, what's their magic? Like, what's their secret? And like, you hear things like that. It's like, I listen. I just really listen. I cultivated listening really well. And you've said that more than once today, or, treating people nicely and respecting people. And, for me, it's like hearing a marketing leader at the helm, of a UPS or these huge brands, even like yourself, talk about some of these really basic but profound things that I think there's a through line there to, you can develop a real career, and not forgetting those really important things of like treating people nice and listening. And, and I think those things get missed a lot. And I think a lot of people are thinking, there has to be this super unique angle I got to bring to the table if I'm ever going to be a leader at that level. And it's like, well, maybe, but also like, don't forget these core things of like, listen and be nice to people.
Big team player.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the marketing team like? Like, what's the culture of the marketing team at Colliers like?
Well,
I think you'll have fun. I would imagine like you'll like to have fun.
Oh, yes. Well, especially in the office that I'm in, we have a wine and now beer fairy that, makes visits. And so we have invested in a great office space everybody has standing desks and, new chairs. I mean, so we've invested in this environment for people to come into and work. But culturally, we don't have any locked doors. Which is a big thing. And we just have, am I allowed to say asshole? Because we have this NAR, no asshole rule.
I love that.
So even if if it's a producer that, is well known and they have, great sales, if they don't mesh well culturally, then we don't want them because we want to protect our culture.
Yeah.
And so we're a big family. We spend most of our waking hours with everyone. And I love our brokers that appreciate time off as much as anybody else does. I've been so amazed by the amount of evenings and weekends where, email goes quiet. And so it's been a lovely industry to be in where everybody has their families and, there is obviously deals that need to happen on the evenings or weekends or, emergencies, but it's not the norm. And we protect those. And so protecting people, having a great work-life balance is part of our culture. And then also just, if they have a reputation for not being the nicest, not allowing them in.
Wow, I love that. Has NAR always been a part of the?
Is
it spoken or unspoken?
It's the first bullet point on our recruiting slide at our monthly meeting is NAR rule.
Wow, who created that? Who was the legendary human?
That would be Patrick Duffy in our Houston office.
Okay, well, Patrick, shout out to Patrick on that one. I love that. I think I've worked at places and I've certainly heard of that before, where just there's a no asshole policy or no asshole rule. I love. And I think to truly stick to it as well, it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference on the culture. So protecting that, I think, is awesome. What are you most excited about in the way the digital world's shifting? Right, things like Web 3.0 and metaverse, and like, how do you think that impacts your world at all?
I think I'm most excited about how easily it's starting to become to connect our technologies. And being able to do that without having some really expensive third-party platform, do it for you, where it's going to take time to change a little thing. Where these platforms that we're using it's kind of like built into the back end, where this data needs to go in and data needs to come out, and so they're kind of building their systems to easily do that because they need to do it too for their side. I love that some of the bigger platforms that we're utilizing, they're heavy users of their own systems. And so I see that they're developing their tool, and it's exactly what we're needing as well.
So when it comes to, like, you think about some of these things you're seeing online in the metaverse, like people selling land, right, in the metaverse and selling properties in the metaverse. Are you thinking about it all getting into that, since you're in the technically, you're selling space or acquiring space? It seems like that there would be a play there. It's at some level, like where you could get in the metaverse and buy or lease space from Colliers in the metaverse.
We haven't just yet.
Okay.
We haven't just yet. There is, what's interesting is this virtual real estate, where you'll pull something up and someone's put a big billboard on a building virtually, and who owns that space? Okay, and so you're seeing legally, like in legal, in the legal descriptions of certain leases, but it's this whole new world that we're already starting to see, and I think it's gonna be really interesting, because if you're a Class A property, you're gonna want to control what people can see outside your building, even in a virtual world.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are really bullish in that world, and some are playing, I would say at a decently high level, creating things, gamifying, coins and games and blockchain stuff that I'm still learning. So that's interesting. What about being a mom and being a CMO? Like, how's that? Because I also, you talk about you and your mom, and how your mom really, it seems like, kind of fostered a way for you to connect with other women, and like part of the women's club right? Was it the women's club?
It was the women's center.
Center, right?
Domestic abuse. Women's Center.
Oh, wow.
So cool. I got to learn a lot about just everything in that field.
Wow. Yeah. So with what's kind of been the balance for you? Because again, at the helm of marketing, huge brand, big reach, you got 2 girls at home. Like, what's that like?
It's probably one of the reasons why I haven't moved, is because I know what's needed, and the flexibility. I know when I can be flexible, and when to put in the hours, and being able to work from wherever. But right now, it doesn't require a lot of travel, and so it's really important. And so I'll be here for a while, because I want to make sure that I have that time for those growing teenager girls and everything that they're in. But then also, my husband used to be a police officer. And so that was, I never knew if he, nights or weekends or holidays. And so he's recently retired, and he's now in a service industry where he gets to set his own schedule. So now he's able to be home when they get home from school. And so that it's definitely, it takes two. And I'm really fortunate to have him right there by me, because I don't know if I'd be able to manage both.
Is he Houston PD?
He started with Houston PD.
Oh, wow. That's cool. What's he doing now?
Insurance for Goosehead.
Wow, what a shift! That's like,
it is. Yeah. You know what though? It took him a little bit to figure out what he wanted to do after being law enforcement, and that's tricky. Just because when you just have one type of experience, right. How do you? So he tried corporate. He tried even like promotional products, but this is a combination of what he really loves to do, which is shop, because he can shop 40 carriers and help people. Because so it's been really great to be on this journey with him and him finding what he really wants to do.
And then, having being married to the CMO, who might know a couple things about marketing is probably not a bad deal. I just can imagine. That's awesome. Okay, what else do you want to talk about? We have a little bit of time. We can do some lightning round fun stuff. But is there any like pressing stuff you want to make sure we mention about you or the business, or exciting stuff, or another story? Or a question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask you yet?
I guess the only one is that the book, what book are you into? Because I'm a heavy reader.
Perfect.
And I don't know if I have booked specifically for marketing, but one that I've read over again that I don't think is well known is a book called Mindsight.
Okay.
And it actually was sold to help you be better at emotional intelligence with the power of your own mindset. But to me, the biggest thing that I learned is how others may come to their emotion or their state of being because of how they were raised. And it has broadened my perspective, and I think just made me more compassionate about any time I come up with a meeting. And, even when you hear a brash or people get stressed, or, it's just made open up my perspective and compassion.
I love
for
that.
Working with others.
Cool. I'm going to get that book too. Mindsight. Awesome. How often do you look to other industries for marketing, strategy or support? Sometimes it seems like a lot of times CMOs don't always talk to each other outside of what they're doing if they have the time, but do you do any of that? Do you kind of look at other?
I'm in a couple of CMO networking groups that are smaller. I love one because it's just maybe like 6 of us locally that meet up. And then also Commercial Real Estate Women Crew is one that I'm involved with that allows me to meet marketers in my industry, but not necessarily direct competitors.
Okay.
So that's cool. Which has been helpful to network there, because I felt I found myself highly networked within Colliers, but not necessarily within the industry or with, locally. And so being part of that group has been great. And then I volunteer a lot.
Really?
Yes. So I help with the foodie awards at the Houston Rodeo, which is a lot of fun. We judge and all the new food in 6 different categories. And so we have the rodeo coming up in March. And then I'm also part of a buyers group that buys at the rodeo. So very Texan thing to do. And then also with the Fort Bend Education Foundation.
Very well. Okay, that's awesome. CMO Club. Are you part of the CMO Club?
No.
Looked into it at all?
No.
Okay. Haven't heard about it?
Maybe heard about it, but have not looked into it.
It's one that I've seen pop up a little bit more now, and it does seem like some of them now. There's, I think, regional, like they get together in different parts of the country, but the folks that are inside the group are like, oh, those are CMOs that a lot of those we talk to all the time. And so some pretty big brands in there. And I'm always on the lookout for other actual communities of like CMOs that are genuinely helping each other out. And so that's another one that I hear about a lot. I think it's connected in some ways to Salesforce. I don't remember, but
a lot that I get pulled into are a lot of B2C
Okay.
And it just doesn't.
Right.
There's so much of it that doesn't apply because we're not getting leads online or selling products online. It's very much a relationship.
Do you have an account-based marketing strategy or focus there at all?
And we do and we don't, but it's so segmented. It's so segmented, and there's not necessarily one title or person that's making that decision. And that's constantly evolving too. And there's so many different types of investments and buyers and groups that it's hard to bucket any one thing, especially nationally. So locally, it may be easier to target some things, but nationally it would be almost impossible.
Okay. Are you doing anything interesting with content, like creating content for your buyers? Like, is it interactive, engaging content? Are you changing the stories that you're telling at all, or what does that look like now?
We try to take some of our content, make it more interesting. I know that right now, Texas is working on a campaign called The Real Estate Game, where it's a whole piece that relates office tenant rep to playing football, and it's going to go out around the same time as Super Bowl, where it relates to you wouldn't play football without a coach, and so you wouldn't want to do an office deal without a broker.
Nice. Okay. See, there's a lot of room for creativity. Okay, cool. All right, let's get into some fun kind of lightning round questions. And the lightning round is brought to you by our friends at Salesforce. Salesforce brings marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. We love you, Salesforce. Okay, lightning round. First question. This is an easy one. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Okay. See, I was going to guess texting.
Unless I had a full keyboard.
Okay. I was thinking tech nerd. You're like me. Tech nerd. I'm like, she's probably a heavy texter, but you like to talk. Okay. What do you love and appreciate about yourself?
So this just happened a couple of times the last few weeks. Usually after a stressful situation, I've been told that I'm the calmest person that people have ever met.
Okay. What is your favorite day of the week?
That would be Sunday.
Sunday, okay.
Live Bible study and getting ready for the week.
Where do you go to church on Sunday? Or in Houston, by the way?
Houston's First Baptist.
Okay, because there's a ton. Wait, is that the one?
Greg Mott. He used to lead at A&M.
What is it off? What is it off of?
610 and I-10. I go to the Sienna campus.
Okay.
But
okay. Favorite city in the U.S. besides H-Town?
I would say El Paso. Have lots of memories and family there.
All
and
right.
so if I get to visit a place on repeat, that would be where it is, just because of everyone there.
Okay. All right. Last film you saw in the theater?
In theater.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tough.
I know.
I would have to think about that. The latest video is Encanto, which have that soundtrack on
repeat.
Yes.
Yep. All the kids are talking about that one too. Yeah. Okay. But do you remember the theater? Can you recall?
No.
Okay.
It's
no
been
worries.
It's been a really long time since COVID.
Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Every language.
Okay. Favorite holiday?
Easter.
Easter.
Can't go wrong with chocolate bunnies and Jesus.
That's great. Favorite live concert?
That would be the rodeo.
Okay, all
right.
It's
like a 3-week live concert series.
Okay, awesome. And that's what's coming up, you said, in Houston?
Yes.
Okay. Scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you?
I would say an 8.
My judgment is you're probably a great driver. Something wise your elders taught you?
Every moment is an opportunity to grow.
Would you pick invisibility or super strength?
Super strength.
Oh, okay. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
All I have is laughter for this one.
I've heard that. That's been a response I've gotten. If you weren't in marketing, what would you be doing?
Volunteering.
Okay. Any particular world you'd be serving in, or just full-time volunteer everywhere?
Oh. Yes. Probably so. Community and enhancing the community. I feel like that's what I do now at work is I get to enhance our community. So volunteering and making and making the community a better place.
What's your least favorite marketing buzzword?
Bandwidth.
That's great. Oh,
Which
man.
I get accused of using myself.
What would you go back and tell your younger self about being a marketing leader?
That's not a speedy question answer. I would go back and tell myself to pick up reading probably a lot sooner than I did.
Reading?
I didn't pick up reading, and most of the reading I do is still Audible just because of schedules and the commute allows me to. But I wish I would have picked up more reading when I was younger.
Okay, I like that. Okay, here's a couple I'm throwing in there at the end. Few people know that you like to...
Few people know that I like to...
Or maybe something that you're secretly curious about.
Board games. I love board games.
Oh, great.
And we get really competitive.
Catan player?
So,
are you a Catan player?
No.
Settlers of Catan?
No.
You didn't know that one? Strategy game? Don't start it. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. What do you like to play? What board games are kind of some of your favorites?
Well, we have the 11 and 12-year-olds, so anything that they can play.
Okay.
And a new favorite one is called Salad Bowl, and that can be up to as many people as possible. And I did make a lot of people play that over the holidays get together.
Okay, I like that. I haven't seen that one. Okay, yeah. Name a time when you made a powerful choice.
When I was sticking up for a company initiative and decided to send an email to someone that was in a bigger position than I was to stick up for this initiative because he was not talking well, but it was an initiative that our company decided to move forward with. And it was the only time that I feel like I've been called into the principal's office. And I just kind of had to sit there and, let him speak. And afterwards, I didn't even realize it, but I was holding a grudge. And there was this ounce of unforgiveness. And I didn't realize it until I did when I was doing some self-reflection. And the next time I came into the office, and I guess decided emotionally to forgive that person. And I smiled. And I didn't realize that my face was telling the world the unforgiveness, but face. And then, he was able to come into my office afterwards just because I smiled at him. And we had this great mutual relationship now. And, eventually he not necessarily apologized, but admitted that, he was wrong, but it was really tough. And then not realizing that I was also kind of fueling the fire. And so that was a big decision just to let it go.
Wow. That's great. That's a great example. That might be one of my favorite examples. Wow. If you had unlimited creativity and support, what would you do?
I would want to create and design things, art.
Okay.
I'm terrible at art though, so I would love a lot more creativity.
I'm an appreciator of art like you. I can't create it, but I can pick things out. I'm like, I love that. That's beautiful, but I can't create it. Courage is
speaking the truth, no matter what.
I love that. Chrissy Nolen, thank you for being here on Marketing Trends. This was a really cool conversation. I'm glad you could come down the road from Houston to be here. And what a great way to set 2022 up for more momentum at Colliers. I know a lot of stuff's great year last year, still on the upswing this year. Congrats to all the growth to you and the team, but most importantly, thanks for being on the show. It was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You rocked it.
Thanks again to Salesforce for making this show possible. To learn more, head over to salesforce.com/marketing.